Obviously, if you tell somebody you're a brain surgeon, you don't have a clue and you charge them, $1 million, that's probably not a good idea. But once you have some skills and you know that you're pretty good at it, what you charge, people will perceive that that's what you're worth. Yeah. And it is. That's true.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hello, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to meet with recording professionals, to hear their stories and learn from their experiences, so that you can take your records to the next level and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Carl Tatz, principal of the recording studio design firm Carl Tatz Design LLC. Carl has been designing award-winning studios for over a decade, driven by his acclaimed and ever-evolving PhantomFocus system monitor tuning protocol, PFS for short. The PhantomFocus system is a complete monitor design protocol that optimizes the listening experience to include the speakers, the room, and the engineer into a finely tuned focal point that allows the sound to float transparently through and around the speakers. It's an incredible experience. Carl's designs extend from the modest but breathtaking high-performance home screening room on one end of the spectrum to the full-blown home theater palace on the other end. His designs always deliver stunningly accurate monitor systems, whether for home mix studios or for complete studio designs for larger studios. His promise is to always wow his clients regardless of the size of their project. Some of the services Carl offers are acoustic design, home screening rooms, recording studio monitor systems, discrete 5.1 listening rooms, room analysis, tuning sound isolation, and now ergonomic furniture design for the studio with the CTD e-chair. Carl Tatz Design has been recognized professionally by the Custom Electronic Design and Installation Association, Audio Engineering Society, Nashville Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, and Carl was the former vice president of the Nashville Association of Professional Recording Services. I have heard Carl's PhantomFocus designed control rooms, and they are something that has to be experienced to truly be believed. Listening to Carl's PFS monitors equals mind blown. My experience was like listening to music radiate from a wall of granite 20 feet tall right in front of me. Heavy, solid, sculpted, and a gigantic sound. I'm very excited to have a world-class studio designer joining us on the podcast today. Please welcome Carl Tatz to Recording Studio Rockstars. Carl, my friend, are you ready to rock?
No doubt.
Dude, thanks for bearing through my long-winded introduction there. You've done some amazing stuff, and I'm not kidding when I say that my experience at Monty Powell's studio when you showed it to me the very first time was like sitting in front of, I felt like I was just sitting in front of a granite cliffside and listening to music come out of it. It just sounded so focused and huge. Can you introduce yourself in your own words a bit, and tell us a little bit more about how you got started and got into what you do?
Sure. That was a fantastic introduction. I think I'm going to hire you from now on.
All right, man.
Very impressive. I hope I can live up to it.
Well, just copy paste, man. Just wherever you need it, just paste it.
Okay. I was a musician, moved to Nashville with the idea that I was going to become Elvis, like I think a lot of us. And then slowly you kind of figured out what you're going to do, what you can do. So I started a studio. Originally it was called Leche Sound in my guest house in Belmead. All this time I was working at a restaurant called Julian's, which is a famous restaurant in Nashville that I eventually became the maitre d' of. First 4-star restaurant in Nashville.
Wow.
My goal was that I was going to get this gear to record my music, and take it around and become rich and famous. Didn't quite work out that way, and people started paying me money to work on their stuff. Again, in this, lovely guest house in Belmead, and I started getting busy, and the owners of the property weren't into the traffic, understandably. So I found a house near Centennial Park, and for 18 years, it became Recording Arts. I was the engineer, the manager, and then eventually, we kept getting improving the monitors and the console and the tape machine. So we started off with a Fostex B16 half-inch 16-track and ended up with Sony 48-track, Mitsubishi 32-track, Atari 24-track, and a brand new SSL G Plus with Ultimation. That was right at the moment that the whole industry was about to go over the cliff. I got really lucky and sold the studio to Sheryl Crow in 2003.
Very cool. I think I remember hearing that. That's such a great conclusion to that.
Totally. And I was doing fine in a sense, but I just wasn't happy doing what I was doing. It wasn't like the old days where you had tons of people coming in, different people all the time. I had just one client. Actually, it was Reed Shippen.
Yeah. I know Reed, went to school with him.
Oh.
He's been on the podcast too. He's a fellow guest.
Well, he's brilliant, yeah. And anyway, he just kind of moved in, but I just ended up being the guy who filled the refrigerators. And my refrigerators at Recording Arts were very famous. As a matter of fact, it was part of the reason that Sheryl Crow bought the studio, because of the refrigerators. I just, to me, it became a hobby where I would just find the most exotic drinks that I possibly could. When people open up and say, "What the hell is this?"
Like alcoholic drinks, or like strange ginger beers from around the world.
Right. Yeah. All soft drinks. Yeah, from around the world. I discovered this ginger ale called Blenheim that made a hut. I mean, it's really, if you got the hut, it was like you took a swig and it was like ginger hut.
Wow.
And I remember, I can't think of the guy's name. Anyway, they came in with an artist and he couldn't sing, and he drank a bottle of the Blenheims and suddenly he could sing like a lark. I sent a case over to them over at Sony at the time.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Did you let the ginger ale company know that they had a new, advertising slogan?
I didn't. I don't think they give a hoot. But anyway, I knew I wanted to get out, and so I got out really well.
So you sold the studio to Sheryl Crow, and then is that when you began your design path?
I began a little before that. I started offering my services to people for free to work on my concept of tuning monitors. And so I did a few of those for free. And then I also did a beautiful 5.1 screening room in Malibu, California, with a friend of mine who hired me to do that. And that kind of really gave me a shot. So I kind of done it. I wasn't in full swing. When I sold the studio, that was a huge transition for me after being the studio owner for Recording Arts and then having to be, I didn't know who I was. And that was a real tough time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I had to reinvent myself.
I have a quick question I want to inject here, because you're talking about the beginnings of your studio design efforts. And we can jump back to where we are now in just one sec. But can you remember one of the first couple of things that you ever did where you felt like you were designing the listening experience for your speakers? And I don't mean high-tech stuff. I mean like way back. Did you first set a pair of speakers in a room and start messing with them? And is there a story behind that?
Yeah, it happened at Recording Arts. I was always into the monitors. You try different monitors and this, that, and the other. And after I got the SSL, I was told, well, you got to get monitoring to be commensurate with it. So I ended up getting a pair of Dynaudio M3s after auditioning a bunch of monitors. They were just sitting there and they're great speakers, but I felt like they had to be tuned, and I didn't know how to do that. So I brought in a professional to do that. He did it and he left, and just listening more, they still sucked, comparatively. So I started playing with positioning and just really kind of got it as best as I could, and then had him come back. And then basically, he controlled the software, and I just put up one cut, and I just kept telling him what I wanted to hear, And then they came out great, and a lot of people thought it was the best monitoring in Nashville after that. Long before that, when I was a kid, my parents would go out at night, and my friends would come over, and we'd take these. My father had a component stereo with separate speakers, and we'd put one up on the piano and one upright on the piano bench and play Led Zeppelin and get stoned. And that was my real inspiration.
There we go. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, that's what did it. It was all about the speakers.
That's the thing that motivates you and keeps you going every day.
It actually is. It's the moment when a client sits down in front of the PhantomFocus system after I've finished it, and to see the look on his face and his expression. If I didn't have the PhantomFocus system, I would not be designing studios. It's that much of a piece.
Yeah.
a studio without PhantomFocus is like taking a shower with a raincoat, if I may. So that's the way I look at it. As you mentioned in the introduction, it's an evolution. It just keeps getting better. I keep learning more and more things about the PhantomFocus system. There's some really early ones I'd love to go back and redo, and sometimes I do. I mean, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But we can talk about that when we get to the PhantomFocus system, I guess.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like I said in the intro, I wasn't kidding. The experience is truly an amazing and transformative listening experience. I've never heard anything sound quite like I've heard music sound when I'm listening to your speaker setup. And I keep threatening to set it up in my own studio. And I look forward to the day when I finally call you and say, Carl, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. No, me too. It's amazing.
So let's move forward. I'd like to ask my guests to share with us an inspirational quote, something to kind of get us really motivated and excited about recording and this thing that we do. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
The only thing I've been able to come up with is just follow through on your dreams.
Great.
And if you get an idea, gee, maybe I can do that, or I'd like to do that, then you do it. It's the difference.
I think that's excellent advice. And I think you're a great example of that. I mean, I've seen you develop and evolve the Carl Tatz Design, the PhantomFocus system. You've come out with new products. It's quite remarkable. You have described to me your process of being able to go in and install a PhantomFocus system and design a control room space. You have had some pretty awesome claims to be able to take a bedroom space, even a small studio if it needs to be, that it is possible and capable to create, a huge listening experience in a small space. So tell us more about that. And let's just keep talking about the PhantomFocus system because we need to know what it is and keep explaining it to us.
Okay. Up until now, the PhantomFocus system it's a protocol. So the hardware includes a pair of subwoofers, now the PhantomFocus stands made by Sound Anchors, a digital processor. Most of the time I use a Ashley engine that's programmed to the PhantomFocus protocols. And that's it. That's the only hardware involved. And the rest is elbow grease. It's a 2-day process for my assistant and I, whether it's, here in Nashville or we do them all over the country. The first day is setting the speakers up. We laser them in. We've got a 4 laser system that we use to get the angle correct and positioning them correctly in the room. There's a lot of pre-work that's done prior to us showing up. If it's one of my studios, then it's all continuous as part of the design. But if it's a studio that we haven't designed, then we need to know what's going on in that room. I need dimensions and all kinds of details so that when we show up, there's not going to be any surprises.
I was pretty surprised, or not surprised, I was impressed that when you and I first started talking about how to design my control room, for example, you said if I could send you pictures and things, you can really sort of construct an understanding of the space.
Oh, totally, yeah. Even if you live next door, I'd prefer pictures than just showing up. Because if I have pictures and they're good pictures, then I'm there all the time. I can look at those all the time. It's never a bad thing to show up, but if I just show up once for a half hour and leave, then I don't have anything. I don't have anything to refer to.
Have you had anybody send you a VR 360 video yet of a space?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I prefer stills.
Yeah.
I've had people send me videos, but I prefer stills and a footprint, drawing and measurements. And then we just talk a lot. So I just really have to get it in my head what's going to happen in this room so that I know when I'm on the plane flying out there, I know what I'm going to do. And I visualize how the whole thing's going to happen,
Yeah, sure.
Once we get there, it's pretty intense. I've got a great assistant who has learned, again, my protocols. It's a good team. So the first day is what I call the rhythm section. We've set up the monitors in the correct position relative to the modes in the room. And I call it the rhythm section because if you don't have that, you're just polishing a turd. You just, you can't EQ it. That's one of my things about some of these self-tuning boxes out now. I recommend them. They're better than nothing. But the physical setup of the speakers is so critical. Once that's done, then the next day, I come in with the speakers and the subwoofers, and I come in with the processor and do, play with crossovers, slopes, and EQ, and get it to lock in to the pocket, the PhantomFocus pocket. And once it's there, it's no secret. It's like, boom. Most recently, we just did one up in Purdue University in Indianapolis. And we designed a mix room for them. And we weren't able to do the PhantomFocus system at the same time, which is unusual. So we went up a few weeks later, and just absolutely stunning.
That's got to be a good place to go to school now.
I'm telling you, we've done a few universities now. Of course, our big one is MTSU. We've got 7 PhantomFocus systems there.
Oh, man, I missed that by 20 years.
Oh, really? Yeah. We refurbed a couple of rooms and put a PhantomFocus system in with their existing Genelec monitors, and nobody wanted to work in any of the other rooms. So we came in and now we did all the rooms now.
Tell us a little bit, we've got listeners all around the world, and if somebody wants to begin to have a sense of what you're talking about, are there a couple of simple starting points that they can start doing, messing with their own studio? Maybe it's a home studio, maybe it's a little more of a studio. But are there some simple tricks to do with the speaker to begin to get an understanding of what the possibilities are if they were to do a full PhantomFocus system?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I teach in my lectures. I would direct people to go to my website and go to Acoustic Tools. I think that's what it's called. 2 things there. There's a software program that calculates the room modes, and there's a chart called the null positioning ensemble. And those 2 things are extremely valuable. It's what we use in the PhantomFocus system. So you can calculate the modes in your room, primarily the nulls, and it's 2 sheets. One is the active software, and the other one is an example that shows you, where the listener and the speaker should be. That's important. And then the null positioning ensemble is a very easy to understand chart of how you should set up your monitors. It's important that people understand that it's not just a general idea of what you should do when you set up your speakers. It's an exact idea. Mm-hmm. You need to do exactly what that says. And if you do, your imaging is going to be amazing. What's missing in that picture is the PhantomFocus system, because if you stay in between the nulls and you get an averaging in the room, and of course the boundary effects can sometimes have a bigger effect than even the nulls and the peaks, but you're not going to be able to EQ it unless you have EQ. I use smart software. I wouldn't recommend anybody runs out and buys it, because you'll get it in front of you after you spend $600 or $700 or whatever it is now, and you'll have no idea what you're doing.
I've seen it, and I know what it's like to look at it and just go, what? I'm sorry, a 360 graph? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, and there's, like everybody, computers are unbelievable, but we always use 2% of what they can actually do. And that's the way it is with smart. There's just certain things I use it for, and that's all I know, and that's all I need. Here's something I'm going to tell you. One of your questions was one of my favorite tips or secrets is if you have a pair of monitors on a stand, in back of a console or even on a meter bridge at ear level, your monitors are going to roll off drastically at about approximately 125 hertz, drastically. I mean, 10 dB. And then it'll come up somewhere where the actual low end of the speaker is 40 or somewhere in there, 40, 50, whatever. So you'll have this huge Grand Canyon of missing information. And don't think that that's not happening with your speakers. It happens 100% of the time. And that this is the reason why, if in my lectures I have a screen, I can show people 20 different actual rooms that I've tuned where I can show you the frequency response graphs and prove to you that that's exactly what happens. Doesn't matter what speaker it is, doesn't matter whether it has built-in subwoofers, doesn't matter. It's going to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why people have such a hard time with the low end, because they don't have that information there. So if you've got something that's in that key, you get it rolling off 125 and say it comes back at 60, well, there's a lot of low-end information at 60 hertz.
Yeah, all my fundamentals between there.
Yeah. So So you've got 60 coming at you, and you think, oh man, listen to that bass, but you're missing all the other information. So if you get the kick and the bass to sound the way you want, and you've got that Grand Canyon of missing information, so that the natural thing to do would be, push up the bass and the level of the bass and get it to sound get your speakers to really kick, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then you take out to the car and you get way too much low end, and everybody goes through that.
Yeah.
So what you have to settle on is like, the bass sounds pretty wimpy. That means it's just right. That's what you have to do. That's what everybody does.
Exactly. I know exactly that feeling. It's such a letdown too.
It's a letdown, and you may have, like I said, you'll have a peak there someplace sometimes, and that will substitute. And you say, oh, that's pretty good, but you still don't have the whole picture.
You're pretty much just giving up with the hopes that your mastering engineer will take care of it for you.
Obviously, most great records have not been mixed on a PhantomFocus system. So what you do is you learn it. My take is you can learn to mix in an empty swimming pool. Eventually, your mind ear figures it out. But the luxury of the PhantomFocus system is you don't have to do that, and you're hearing what you always dreamed you could hear, And so it's such a joy, and it's much easier.
Well, I will point out an experience for me. The first time we were over at Monty Powell's studio and I was listening, and I think he had the Tannoy Golds, and you had done the PhantomFocus in there. And I played a record I had just finished, and the bridge came. And I swear there was a rhythmic part going on in the bridge that I never knew even existed. It was like a triplet rhythm that I had no clue it was even part of my music. So it's very true. When you listen on the PhantomFocus system, you can hear stuff that you may not have caught somewhere else. Now, it might show up in a certain, another listening environment that highlights that frequency or something.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a real important myth I'd like to dispel now. When people say, I heard things on this system I never heard on another system, the only time that's true is with a PhantomFocus system. People say it all the time. The guy who's got a pair of $150 speakers and bumps up to a pair of $300 speakers is going to say the same thing. Oh man, I never heard those cymbals. I never knew that was there. Mm-hmm. That's only because that you've got some kind of peak on these speakers that you didn't have on the other speakers. So you're hearing different. You hit it on the head. There's some other frequency anomaly that's accentuating some frequency. So when people tell me that, I'd roll my eyes because it's just a myth. That's all that's happening. It's not that those speakers are great. The speakers could be great, but that's not why they're saying what they're saying. Mm-hmm. If someone says that about a PhantomFocus system, yes, you're right. Because there are no peaks and dips anymore, generally speaking. So no frequencies are being masked, and especially all the way down to the low end. The low end on a PhantomFocus system is like a mesa. It's so flat because it's easier to get the low end flat than it is the high end, and you don't want to anyway.
I think my granite cliff analogy and your mesa, we're now talking the same language there. The idea that you're going to mix on your home studio speakers and then you go listen in the car and all of a sudden you hear a different bass because the car is accentuating different frequencies, or you go listen on a laptop and you're going to hear different elements because that's accentuating different frequencies. My perspective of the PhantomFocus system is when you can hear everything all the time while you're working, I'm guessing you can address all those alternate scenarios when you're actually mixing it and not have to go listen to it in 10 other places to discover all the things that are going on with your mix.
That's correct. Yeah. And you don't need, some people will have 2-3 sets of monitors, I quickly dispel that. I have to instruct them that you don't need that anymore because you had 3 sets of inaccurate speakers. Now you're going to have 1 set that are accurate. There is one argument to have another set of speakers in that, as you know, when you listen to the PhantomFocus system and when you're sitting in the sweet spot, the speakers kind of disappear. You're just hearing the imaging, the pinpoint imaging. So if you feel like you want to hear what speakers sound like, I can recommend or suggest that you get a pair of speakers and put them off to the side. Don't put them in the middle. Don't put them between the speakers because it will affect the imaging. You don't want anything in between. Same thing holds true for people who have computer monitors. They'll have them right in between the speakers. Really bad idea. It affects, and I've got some people who do it, and I can demonstrate to them by just pulling it off and hearing the difference. Yeah,
I took that advice from you
good.
in the past where I got a larger monitor rather than a smaller one up close. I got a much larger monitor and I pushed it all the way back to the wall. So it's on the wall behind the speakers.
Yeah, that's what you want. Yeah, I mean, typically that's what we recommend, like, 60-inch, TV behind there. That's, and angle it. Make sure you angle it.
Yep.
Angle it down like about 3-4 degrees.
Well, so I wanted to dig into some of the terminology a little bit with you. Let's define a few things and simplify, if you can, for some of the listeners who are just discovering what all this stuff is all about. We talk about imaging. You say that when you close your eyes, you can't, you don't hear the speakers. They're not there anymore. Now you just have this three-dimensional image of music in front of you. And so I would point out that when the PhantomFocus system is focused, all of a sudden, if a voice is panned to the center of a mix, it literally sounds like it's floating right in front of you as you're listening. You hear it dead center. You don't hear it kind of from the left and the right. Can you explain what imaging is? Okay,
well, I don't want to leave your listeners hanging on the other thing. Is like, short of the PhantomFocus system, which is obviously the best solution as far as frequency response, there are many of these auto-tune things now. The Grand Canyon of missing information, the only way you can correct that is with subwoofers, okay? Mm-hmm. But if you try and do it by ear, you'll never be accurate. I couldn't do it by ear. If you do it by ear, then you just do it, and again, it just ends. It might be more satisfying to you, and then gradually you'll learn that system, But if you get one of these auto-tuning things, I think Genelec probably has the most vital system now. I can't remember what they call it, where you hold up a microphone and tones come out, and it will tune it together. It won't be, it'll be a pale imitation of a PhantomFocus system, but it's much better than not doing it. So I would encourage you to try these things. And I don't have experience with them, really. I just know generally what they're doing. Some are pretty affordable, and some are like as expensive as the PhantomFocus system. I don't know why anybody would ever spend that money for a box.
Right.
Compared to having, professionals come in and, do it. It's sort of like having software to mix a record where you can press a button for country, rock, classic, grunge, and you press a button and it mixes it for you.
Well, it's kind of like the difference between just sending away for a catalog suit for your wedding or having a tailor make one for you. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's a good analogy too. Okay, so imaging. I'm just going to say what people say to me when they're sitting in the sweet spot. It's so intense. The triangle, and again, you'll see it on that null positioning ensemble, this 30-degree equilateral triangle, and you're inside the apex of that triangle, that the speakers seem to go away. And I've had people tell me, not only does the vocal seem like it's floating right there, like there's a center speaker, I can easily tell, where it is, whether it's an upfront vocal, whether it's back. I mean, you can really, find the pocket for the vocal with the PhantomFocus system.
Interesting.
And the other thing that happens is all your sources sound drastically different. They never sound like the speakers. They sound like the recording. You can hear the difference in one bass guitar to the other bass guitar, or upright, whatever. I mean, it's that revealing. It's like a microscope. And then when you pan, I've had people tell me that, I know where 12 o'clock is. I can see 1:30, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock as you're panning. It's that precise.
Yeah. So the imaging is essentially the sound stage from left to right, and the center image, the stage off to the left, stage off to the right. Now, do you also find that all of a sudden something sounds like it's beyond the speaker at times? You sort of hear further than all the way to the left?
I've had people say that to me. If I was going to use one word, it would be enveloping. If you step outside of the triangle, the sweet spot, It goes away. I mean, it'll sound good in the rest of the room, but when you sit down in that sweet spot, which it's just aimed for that listener, it's like being in another room. Like you've opened the door, you walked in, you're in a completely different room. It's set for one listener in one position. Another myth I want to dispel is people talk about, wider sweet spot, and it's just nonsense. There can only be one position. And I'm not making that up. That's not a PhantomFocus thing. That's physics. Where if you're sitting in the center of a console, in between two speakers, that's where we're going to tune it from. If you move to the left, if you move to the right, you're going to be closer to one speaker than the other, and the frequency response will change.
You're in a different part of the room even.
Yeah, that's the way it is, folks. Don't let somebody blow your skirt up about that. Now, when you move out of that with the PhantomFocus system, it isn't like it goes away or it sucks.
Right. It doesn't go from giant, beautiful movie theater sound to a laptop speaker in 3 inches. Your brain still compensates.
It sounds fine. And my argument is, if you're going to work on the side of the console, here's a great example, is that there are a lot of two-way near-field monitors. And most of the manufacturers insist that they be set up vertically so that the tweeter is above the woofer. Because if you put it sideways, then the phase will change. And they're right. However, the only time that that's a problem is if you're out of the center. So what we typically do, if it's a two-way, we'll put the tweeters on the inside and, tune it for that center position. If you move to the left or right, there'll be some change. But my concept is, if you're over on the side of the console and you're mixing a record on the side of the console, you should think about a different career. You might want to think about selling shoes. So you're going to be in the center anyway. Our experience is that monitors typically sound better sideways than they do upright. They're more enveloping.
My NS10s, for example, they're designed to be sideways. Subwoofer, or the woofer's in the center and the tweeter is to the outside.
Yeah, and most people would argue, well, that's wrong. They should be upright, But again, they will always sound better if they're done right. Another critical thing that I did mention as part of the null positioning ensemble is that the tweeters need to be at ear height, and you need to measure that. A desert island ear height would be 48 inches. Most people, when you measure from the floor to their ears, it's approximately 48 inches, or exactly 48
Sitting in a chair.
Sitting in a chair, yeah. But we've had them higher. We've had them as high as 53, and I've had one as low as 46, I think, or 7. That's rare.
Have you had anybody ask for a standing mix position yet?
Yeah, I think maybe 1 or 2 people said that they were considering, getting one of those desks that go up and down or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a particular good application for a PhantomFocus system. Mm-hmm. But yes, we could. Why not? My point was that you want to get the speaker tweeter at ear height. If you're 48 inches, you want to get the tweeter 48 inches. I can't stress that enough. It makes a huge difference. And it took me years to actually lock into that. And I'll give you an example of me not even listening to my own advice. We're putting the PhantomFocus system in a studio we designed in Aspen, Colorado. And because of our time constraint, I just wanted to get it done that night. So I was there till midnight. And it was a pair of Atom S3XHs. And they'll tell you that, the center of the, and other speaker manufacturers will tell you that the center, on a 3-way, which that is, the center of the speaker is midway between the tweeter and the mid-range driver. So I don't know why I decided to pay attention to that, but I did. So that's where I put the height. So that's where I put the 48 inches, if that's what it was at the time.
I see.
And I'm listening to it, and it sounded terrible. Just harsh and thin. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, of course, what am I doing? So I got my assistant out of bed at 11:30 at night in the motel and told him to come down. And we lowered them to the correct height, and all of a sudden, boom. So I learned my lesson. There's a lot of hard lessons you have to do. So suddenly that's it. So get at ear height.
I'll repeat that back to you. Set your tweeters to be 48 inches from the ground, ear height.
Set your tweeters to be ear height. I can't swear that your ear height is 48. Measure it. Whatever it is, that's what it needs to be. Now, if you have a console or something that puts the speakers, higher than that, and you can't get them. That's another reason for putting speakers sideways instead of upright, because you have more of a chance to get it at ear height. But even then, sometimes you can't get it at ear height because you got a high meter bridge or something. And at that point, then you have to angle it. You have to angle it down, which is no easy trick. We had to do that at one of the rooms at MTSU Studio A. They've got a big API. And we had to angle down those event opals. They've got round sides. They're just amazing to have to figure out how to calculate.
Yeah.
But we angle those down. But so you have to angle. I do it with a drawing, and then I can figure out what the degrees are, and then we measure the degree and angle it so that the path of the tweeter crosses the ear of the engineer.
Wow.
Hopefully you won't have to do that.
So let's jump to some of the other terminology too. And thank you for clarifying all that stuff about imaging. How about modes? What are room modes if you were to explain it and simplify for somebody?
It's based on the speed of sound, and it only applies to low frequencies. So it's the time that it takes to go from the back wall to the front wall and back again. And I'm not going to be able to explain it. Just Google it. I used to be able to explain it better, but I can use that calculator. It's a wonderful calculator. It's the best I've ever seen, and it's free. There you go.
Okay.
But basically, in the modes, you're going to have dips and you're going to have peaks. The dips, otherwise known as nulls, those are deadly. So you don't want the speakers to be in the dip, and you don't want your ears to be in the dip.
That means, to clarify that means that whatever that frequency is of that null in that spot of the room, you're not getting any of it. It's just canceling itself out, right?
Yeah, based on a perfectly rectangular room. This calculator is based on a rectangular room. If you don't have a rectangular room, it's not going to be particularly accurate. Although I find that the length modes, which is what you're going to be more concerned about, is fairly close. And even once you set it up and do exactly, you get your modes and you figure, well, this is where they should go. That's your starting point. Then at that point, and this is where the name ensemble comes in. You want to move the speakers, the console, and you ensemble back and forth. And you're not going to do this in a half hour. I mean, getting an angle. I mean, even before you start moving stuff, getting that angle. As soon as you change the angle, it changes the distance, between the tweeters, which is crucial also.
Well, I would point out that even if we spent 20-something years working on this and became the number one expert at setting this up in the world, it would still take us 2 days, right? Isn't that what you just said?
Well, yeah, right. Right, exactly. Yeah. There's so much more involved that we do, but, you could do that, I would think, in a couple hours, at home.
And, as a starting place for people setting up their monitoring, I mean, it's a little tricky when you have a console because you've got this big thing that's sort of in your way. But if you've got an open space and you can start with just the speakers and the stands and just kind of position and really listen, isn't that sort of a good place to start before you even put anything else in there?
Well, I mean, if your console's already in there, then there you are. So you're going to have to move the console at the same point with it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very valuable without the console.
Yeah.
But I mean, once you get it set up to the null positioning ensemble, you get your triangle and you get your 67.5 inches tweeter to tweeter. And that's a number I came up with that we always use just because we can be totally consistent. You could make it 68 or you could make it 66 or 67.5 is great. So I'd recommend 67.5 is just as easy as another figure. And that's just so that you've got that 18-inch triangle in front of the console. And again, if you look at the chart, it's pretty easy to understand.
Okay.
But once you get that, then you can take some tape and put it on the floor and just move it ahead 6 inches and move it back. And, if the room's small enough, you may not have any choice at all. That might be it. And if it sounds bass shy to you, then you want to go closer to the front wall. That's all you can do unless you get the subwoofers. And another note about subwoofers is that we always use 2 subwoofers and we corner load them because that will put the first and third axle null width mode out of phase. So the subs will actually become out of phase with each other at those 2 frequencies when you're in the middle of the room. It's a lot easier for me to explain this if you were looking at the chart.
I love it. Well, there was another term you used. You said boundary, and I know what you mean, I think, but maybe you could explain that simplify that for people.
As you move a speaker toward a wall, your bass is going to increase. That's why you see on some speakers, active speakers, you'll see switches that will compensate for boundary effects. They'll have, they pick a frequency, I don't know what it is, 60, 70, whatever, and they've got a couple of positions. So if it starts sounding bass heavy, then you can click this switch. The sad part is you still got the Grand Canyon of missing information.
Sure, yeah. So essentially the boundary means the walls that the sound is bouncing off of. Correct. Once it leaves the speaker on its way to you.
Yeah.
And, a reminder, Rockstars, your speaker, it sends out sound, it's leaving the speaker itself and it's coming directly to you, but it's also going out the back of the speaker and it's bouncing off the back wall and coming to you. It's also going out the left of the speaker and it's bouncing off the left wall and coming to you. It's also bouncing off the ceiling. It's bouncing off the floor. It's bouncing off the console. And all these things coalesce into the actual sound that you hear in your position. So,
right. Well, that's just a quick tutorial on that. You want to catch your first reflections. And I think most people know about the mirror trick. You have someone once you've done your null positioning ensemble and you think that's pretty good, you have somebody walk along the wall with a mirror, and you sit there, and where you can see the speakers on one wall, that's where you want to put your absorption. And obviously you do the same thing on the opposite wall. And the same thing for the ceiling. You want a cloud, you want to grab that reflection off the ceiling. And my philosophy is you want the back wall to be totally dead. Don't put diffusers on there. That's my opinion, but I'm not a fan of diffusion on the back wall. Just you want the sound to go back and stay back, because any sound that comes back to you causes comb filtering, and that's where you get the dips. Now the console is unavoidable. You're going to have some dips there.
And if you don't have a console, you may have a desk, or you may have some sort of computer interface.
Right, which can be worse, because it's a flat surface. Just keep that in mind. I mean, you're not going to, without, EQ or powerful DSP, you're not going to be able to do too much about it. So,
well, can I point out, just throw out a little experiment for our listeners? One thing that I did is when I was first listening to my speakers and setting them up, I was aware of that reflection off the console, and I took a couple of extra panels and I sort of set it so that they were on top of the console, so that they were between. They were blocking the reflection from the speaker down off the console to my ear. And it was pretty remarkable, the difference in sound that happened just from doing that. So I wonder if, just as an experiment, people could take, a comforter or something, kind of lay it all over the desk or the console, just to hear what kind of a difference that makes.
Again, that's another interesting point. I remember I was doing one system years ago, and, there was an obvious reflection on the console. We did exactly what you talked about. And you could see the dip came right up.
Yep, that's what happened with me too.
However, it sounded better without the absorption there.
Well, as I recall, my dip that came right up was somewhere in the 200, 250 region. Many of us would call that the sort of the muddy region of the mix. So in a way, you're almost pulling out some of the mud of the sound with that comb filtering going on, I guess.
What happens is, you get the direct sound and then you have it bouncing off the console, so you get a delayed sound, and that's where the notching helps. Now, if you had a peak at 200, that may have worked in your favor.
I probably did.
So yeah, because if you pull out 200, then the vocals sound thin.
All right, cool. Well, some really great insights into the way you work in the space and set up the PhantomFocus system. And thank you for all these great starter places for people to begin to understand their monitoring. Are there any more take-home tricks that you want to suggest to people, just as a place to begin with all this and get to understand it better? Or should they just get busy and get to your site and start checking out the room calculator and begin to understand it a little better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll help them tremendous. Again, there's another misnomer is when people talk about tuning a room. You don't tune a room, you tune the monitors. Don't worry about, the rest of the room so much. All you really, really care about, especially in a home situation, is that listening position, I can never promise, exactly what's going to happen in the room, whether there's going to be modes in the room, there's going to be places in the room, like the middle of the room where it's, there's a bass buildup. You want to stay out of the middle of the room always. You want to stay out of the middle of the room lengthwise and widthwise. The problem is you can't stay out of the middle of the room widthwise. But when you have subwoofers, they become out of phase with each other, like I was mentioning, and it takes that dip right out. Now, if you don't have subwoofers, even the left and the right speaker, they will react to the left and right front wall corner, and that will attenuate that first and third width mode also. So you don't have to panic. You can easily over bass trap too.
Yeah, give us some tips on that. I've heard people say that a overstuffed couch can be a pretty good choice in a control room.
Yeah, if you put that in the back, the bass is always going to build up on the back wall, unless it's a false wall. We call it axle mode attenuation, walls, what we do. And I won't get into that, but if you can get 4 inches of 703 in the back, I recommend using 703 and not using, the pink stuff. Pink stuff is just too absorptive, just really deadens things up. Always use 703. It's got a little bit of a 10K bounce to it.
It keeps it bright.
Yeah, well, not bright, but I mean, it doesn't make it so dead. So don't use pink stuff as absorption.
Does that go for the recording space as well? If you're, deadening out a room or an area, maybe stay away from the pink stuff?
I would, yeah. I just think it's too dead. It's just too absorptive. Same things with rock wool. We don't generally use rock wool. Rock wool is a thermal insulator, and people seem to make a big deal about it, using it instead of, the pink stuff, but it doesn't do it, in walls. It doesn't do a better wall. Matter of fact, there's a study that it's actually not even as good as the regular pink stuff. One of my gurus, a guy who writes, like 3-inch thick books and designs, multi-million-dollar auditoriums, his comment to me was, there's no such thing as acoustic insulation. There's just insulation.
Yeah.
So we don't, save your money. And also it's a pain in the ass to work with. So don't worry. I'd use 703. It's just got a nicer quality or 705. Most of the panels that you buy, prefab panels, they're not 703, they're 705.
Now, I know that you also have a brand of Auralex or a signature Carl Tatz brand of Auralex. Is that something that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great product. They're still developing it. I mean, the sales department still is trying to get their head wrapped around it. But I've even had Sweetwater ask me about it. They just need to get their act in gear. But basically, it simulates what we do. I mean, a good example is on the website, go look at the Dream Room. And that's pretty close to what you can do by yourself. You can just see it's painted walls and it has the columns and the panels. And that's pretty close to what it is. You can just buy this kit and put it up yourself.
Cool.
We use mirrors just because it makes the room feel better. But you could put your mirrors up and do that. You just have to figure it out yourself if you want to get fancy. But I mean, they're basically rigid fiberglass product. The columns are a little different. They're reflective on one side, absorptive on the other side. And when you set them up along the wall that way, it creates what we call the acoustic lens. It's great because it gives you reflection, diffusion, and absorption on the side walls. And that's what you want. You don't want it too dead on the side. Where your ears are, you don't want that to be dead. You want the first reflection point to be dead.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Because I know, there's one Carl and Tatz and your assistant, and I don't know whether you guys have expanded in terms of the design firm for being able to design multiple studios at one time. But for those who may be, anywhere in the world and not ready for the full PhantomFocus system, it's great that there's an option to start getting into some of the design stuff that you offer to treat your space and really tune your room. I got to stop saying tune your room.
Okay, yeah, I know. I probably use it myself. Yeah, I mean, I just know that many of the attendees at my lectures will come back to me or send me an email and thank me. What a huge difference just, those simple things made.
Yeah. Well, Carl, thank you for clarifying and simplifying some of those other terminologies and points. I do have sort of a deeper question from one of our followers who, I didn't print out the name, so I apologize, but I'll include that later. But I do have the question to share with you. Answer it in any way you want. If it's too complex, you can answer it that, whatever makes sense. But this comes through our Facebook group. He says, my control room is one of the only rooms in my studio that does not have non-parallel walls. So I think he's saying it does have parallel walls. And what I've learned is that having a rectangular control room can actually be a benefit because it makes it easier to calculate, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But he says the dimensions are 19 and a half feet long, 11 and a half feet wide, 7 3/4 feet high. And he said, which is a pretty short ceiling, I would point out. He says, do you approve of me using arched binary amplitude diffusers with 4-inch absorption behind them on the back wall and first reflection points, ?
Yeah, I saw that, I guess, on Facebook. I don't go on Facebook too often. I think my response to him was 2 words, PhantomFocus system.
That sounds like 3 to me. Is that 2?
Well, PhantomFocus is one word. So.
All right.
Yeah, I don't use those things. That was kind of a technical question. Again, just in reviewing what I would do, and I've had clients who will actually look at the photos of my rooms and kind of copy the look, and kind of copy it in some way, and then they'll have me come in and do a PhantomFocus system, and it works pretty well. I mean, it's not a Carl Tatz room, but it's pretty good. Again, the PhantomFocus system works in bedrooms. If you just put the panels up and get the first reflection, I can guarantee that sweet spot, and the sweet spot in that guy's bedroom is going to be as good as any studio in the world.
That's just amazing. Say that again. You're saying that you can tune a monitor system in a bedroom-sized control room and still get the sweet spot to be as full frequency and the imaging and focus of a multi-million-dollar studio.
Yep.
That's pretty incredible.
Yep. Yeah, it's fun.
And I've listened to your PhantomFocus system in some different spaces, and it's always blown me away, every single room that I've been in. So, Carl, I remember that you now have a new product that you're promoting. Would you like to tell us more about the e-chair? This is this new, exciting ergonomic furniture design that you're launching.
I just discovered this chair, and I said, "This is great." I met the designer. It's a very interesting backstory. He's a former race car driver, and when he retired, he had broken every bone in his body. He decided he was just going to design the greatest chair ever for task chair, and he came up with this, and it is. It's spectacular. Anybody who wants to see it, there's a terrific video for it on my store site called shop.carltatzdesign.com, and just look for the e-chair. The chair is just amazing. I would just invite your listeners to just go to that website and look at that video.
And it does some pretty cool things. I know it's designed, one of the things that we do a lot in the studio is we lean forward. We're sort of, it's a very proactive thing that we do. So we're not CEOs lounging back in our chairs while we work. We're really attentively leaning forward over the keyboard or the console.
Right. And so the chair works with you, leans with you. It puts you in a position where you can work all day and not be fatigued. It's not the kind of chair you want to sit down and relax in. If you just sat down, like if you had an Aeron chair and you had that chair next to each other and you sat down in one, you would think the Aeron chair is much more comfortable.
Interesting.
But for working, and a lot of the e-chair owners have Aeron chairs and they're using these now instead. But when you're working, you're in front of a console, it makes you sit upright. You can't slouch in it. You have to kind of lock yourself in. But once you're in, you realize, oh, this is what I wanted, and your posture will, really benefit. The chair is actually good for you.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I noticed even with my non-PhantomFocus system, but just sort of towing the speakers in just right and having a sweet spot or something that just sounds better to me, is that I found myself wanting to or needing to sort of sit upright, good posture to be in the spot that I was measuring, or just trying to sit upright. And that's hard to do in regular chairs. It almost hurts your back to have to make yourself sit up like that all day.
Right, and the lumbar support is just phenomenal. You just never experienced lumbar support like this. And it's been really well received. We've got Alan Parsons has a couple, Ed Cherney, Kevin Killen. These are famous engineers, and they all rave about it.
Wow.
It's really exciting. And it's so good that it actually comes with the PhantomFocus system. It's an integral part now. So.
Oh, very cool, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Just include that as part of it. But the other new thing that's happening, the most exciting thing for me right now, is the PhantomFocus monitors. I have my own speakers now. And
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We've placed 3 pairs now, most recently at Purdue, and I think before that at Crystal Gale Studio. And you'll see a press release on that next week. But it's been an evolution. It's just taken a while, and I've wanted to do this forever. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, the PhantomFocus system will work with anybody's speakers, but it was kind of a no-brainer for me to come out with my own speaker. But for me to do it, it was going to have to be better than anything else out there.
Sure.
And it is. But it's taken me a while. I kept playing with drivers, this, that, and the other. The subwoofer system is the first subwoofer I've used different subwoofers, and the only difference I can really tell is that some are more powerful, they'll go lower, but the entry-level PhantomFocus subwoofers sounded just as good as the high-powered ones, just they wouldn't play as loud or go as deep.
Yeah.
This new one, what I call a pistonic low-frequency emitter, it's really exciting. It's built into a quarter-inch aircraft aluminum case. It weighs a ton. The driver is huge, and it has this pistonic chamber that it actually drives a passive driver. People use passive drivers. They'll put it in the box, but this is a direct drive unit. And what it does is it controls the bass and actually increases the energy. So these things, I think they weigh like 85 pounds a piece.
Wow. These are the speakers or these are the subwoofers?
These are the subwoofers.
Okay.
And they're really small. Big. I think they're like 14 inches square, and they're down-firing, so you can really put them in a corner just really tidily. The speakers themselves has a very expensive Scandinavian Scanspeak tweeter and Morel drivers. It's loosely based on the Dynaudio M1 speaker, which had always been my favorite speaker, but this bumps the whole thing up a bunch. It's still an evolution, so I haven't made a hard opening for it yet. Still trying to figure out the processing, and, very powerful. We've done it with 800 watts on the speakers and 400 watts, and we're thinking about doing bi-amping, and there might be 2 or 3 different versions of it. But this is it. So once I get it locked in, we'll probably do an event, I'm guessing at the Blue Grotto, maybe an AES event to show it off.
Well, that's very cool. Well, thank you, Carl, for all this stuff. Why don't we take a break? And then when we come back, we'll hit the jam session, which is just a series of kind of quick questions. Thanks for listening. Once again, a reminder, you can find the show notes to everything we're talking about at rsrockstars.com or recordingstudiorockstars.com. I made the RS Rockstars, so you don't have to wear your fingers out typing the URL. We'll have links to Carl's website, Carl Tatz Design, all the different products. We'll have links taking you right to the room mode calculator and the ensemble. I'm going to say it, make sure I don't say it wrong. It was the
Null Positioning Ensemble.
Thank you. The Null Positioning Ensemble. So you can go check those things out. If you're on your iPhone using the podcast app, just click through with your finger. You can just press right through and that link will take you straight there to go check it out. And we'll see you guys in just a moment for the jam session. Hey everybody, it's Lid Shaw, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, I've created a special mix tutorial just for you, Rockstars, totally free, called the Mix Master Bundle. With it, you get over 2 hours of detailed videos watching over my shoulder as I mix a song in my studio. Plus, I give you the free ebook that explains how I recorded the tracks. And you get downloadable multitracks so that you can practice your mixes, including the Pro Tools session file, using nothing but stock plugins in Pro Tools, all of which you would find in any other DAW, whether you're on Logic or Studio One or Reaper. Maybe you're struggling with trying to improve your mix technique, or maybe you just simply don't have access to multitrack files or can't record a full drum set in your studio. I wanted to give you a chance to create your own mixes from full drum kit, bass, and guitars recorded in my studio. The song is called American Winter, and it's off my instrumental record, Skadoosh, and it's all available for you totally free right now. All you need to do to get it is text Mix Master Bundle to 33444, and I'll send it directly to your email. Again, that's Mix Master Bundle with no space to 33444, or you can go directly to mixmasterbundle.com, enter your email, and I'll send all the files directly to you. Thanks so much, Rockstars. We'll see you guys in the jam session. Cheers. Hey, Rockstars. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast. We're just getting into the jam session, and our guest today is Carl Tatz from Carl Tatz Design LLC. Carl, welcome back. Are you ready to jam?
I am.
All right, cool, man. Well, tell us, when you got started out in recording, what was one of the things that was holding you back?
Paying bills.
Paying bills. How did you ever solve that?
I was working in a restaurant, but I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. So I had this guest house. So I just, again, followed my dream, and I took out like an $8,000 loan, which everybody thought I
Wow.
was crazy at the time.
I think you're crazy right now.
Yeah, right. And I just bought all this recording equipment, and that's how I got started. Worked out pretty good.
That's really inspiring. I mean, your inspirational quote to get us started was, follow through in your dreams and just go for it. And here you are, an example of working in a restaurant, trying to get your career off the ground, and you do the riskiest thing ever, which was take out a huge loan to start buying recording equipment.
Yeah. Well, I knew I could pay the loan, I knew I could keep up with the money I was making in the restaurant, but still, I didn't know what else to do, and that's what I wanted to do. So I just did it.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I think some examples of places people might invest in themselves today are obviously, home studio recording setups to get started, but also just education and learning, the value of investing in yourself and really digging in deep to learn this stuff and get going.
Right.
Well, so Carl, what about some of the best advice you received when you were beginning or at any point?
You're worth what you charge.
Well said. Can you kind of elaborate on that and what that means for those of us and doing various things?
It just means, obviously, if you tell somebody you're a brain surgeon, you don't have a clue when you charge them, $1 million, that's probably not a good idea. But once you have some skills and you know that you're pretty good at it, what you charge, people will perceive that that's what you're worth. Yeah. And it is. That's true.
Well, let's make that even more pragmatic. So you had a vision for designing an incredible studio system. At the beginning, it was maybe just a vision. You had some experience, you had some ideas, but it was really just, I think I'd like to do this thing. If you had set out and, set all of your prices so low that, you kind of followed the race to the bottom model, what do you think would have happened? Do you think you would have been able to let the system evolve? Do you think you'd be launching a new speaker system and a complete package at this point down the road?
My impetus was the studio. In the studio business, what happened, the commercial studio business went down the tubes. People would just keep grinding your price, you go down and down and down. And I vowed that I would never get into that situation again. So I said, well, I'm going to learn something that nobody else knows. And that's where I came up with my own system. Nobody does what I do. There are the studio designers, but I'm not in competition with them because they don't do what I do.
Yeah.
So I can kind of name my price. People think I'm expensive. I'm not expensive. It's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was my point, was that, when you had this vision for creating this thing, by setting the price to represent the value, it allowed you to evolve this concept in the business and the product such that you end, where you go is a place of great, great value, because the PhantomFocus system is incredibly valuable and it sounds that incredibly good.
Yeah, if you want a Mercedes-Benz, this is how much it costs. You can't go to a Toyota dealer and buy a Mercedes-Benz. This is how much, this is it,
Yeah.
And that's where you want to, obviously you have to have a great product, and that's where you want to be business-wise. So I'm not sure how that translates to somebody, a producer. Well, I mean, if you're a producer, you've had some success, that's what it is. I mean, suddenly you have, great success, then you will be perceived by, record companies or whomever to be worth whatever you charge at that point. So that's where you want to get.
Yeah, well, I think that a producer is a great analogy, because when you're producing, there is a whole lot you can put into music. You could do something that, spend a day on it and kind of do it quickly. You could spend a month on it and really address all the finer points and the details and, not stop till you've created something fantastic. So I think that's a good analogy. Here's a question for you. When somebody's trying to adopt this concept for the first time and they're saying, all right, I'd like to charge, for what it's worth, and I'd like to set my standards high, they're bound to experience some points where they feel like, gosh, I just missed some opportunities. People didn't go for it or whatever. Is that part of just the process? What's that like? What advice?
Right. Obviously, when you're starting off, like I said, I did stuff for free. I was thrilled just to have the opportunity to try what I wanted to try. But once you've had some success, then you set your price. But the way I look at it, when people ask me, how much is a PhantomFocus system or what a studio or mix room is going to cost, if they think it's high, then they're not my client. Simple as that.
Good point. Good point.
Don't worry about it.
You're trying to find the right people to work with.
Right. You just want people who get you.
Okay, so now how about sharing with us a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce? I know we've been talking about studio design. You can continue on that path if you want, or if you got something that's just good advice for recording and making records, which you've done plenty of.
There's so much information out now that wasn't around when I was in the thick of it. So I guess I'll probably just refer to the 125 hertz monitor roll-off that we discussed earlier. That's something you should really know about.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. All right. Now, what about a favorite hardware tool in the studio? Something that when you're, I guess in your case, maybe it's designing, but when you're making records, what's something that you like to have around? You don't have to mention an 1176, for example. It could be something unexpected, but it always makes making records a good experience.
I have 2 words: PhantomFocus system.
Okay. Good deal, man. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know anything more valuable in a studio, seriously.
Yeah, if you can hear what you're doing.
Yeah, what's more important than the monitors? Nothing.
Yeah, because there's a lot of choices you can make just by moving a microphone. And
Right.
there's a lot of, the simplest EQ that comes default in any DAW already can do an infinite number of things. Well, maybe not infinite, but pretty close to infinite. Mm-hmm. And if you could hear what you're doing, then you can make all those choices intentionally.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how amazing your chain is, your vocal chain is. If you can't hear it, what difference does it make?
Right. You might luck into something one day that sounds good.
That's what everybody does. They luck into it and they learn their system, and that's valuable and viable alternative, because that's what most people do.
Yeah.
However, would you rather go across town in a pair of roller skates or in a Rolls Royce?
Well, I guess it depends on how old you are.
Yeah, that's true. I still take the Rolls.
Yeah. All right, cool. So now how about a favorite software tool?
I think, again, the room mode calculator and the null positioning ensemble that your rock stars can check out.
Okay, cool. Great. Yeah, that'll be a first for that for sure.
In your notes, you mentioned a favorite book or film. There's 2 acoustic books that I think are real basic, or one's very basic. It's called The Master Handbook of Acoustics by Alton Everest. I think everybody should know about that.
Okay, cool.
Really good to know. And then for more advanced would be Sound Reproduction by Floyd Toole, who's one of my mentors and associates now. He basically invented small room acoustics single-handedly. Brilliant guy. Worked for Harman for many years.
Wow. All right, cool. Great. Thank you for suggesting both of those. We'll have links to those.
As far as movies, would be The Wrecking Crew, Standing in the Shadows, 20 Feet from Stardom, the Muscle Shoals movies, movie. Those are all very inspiring.
All great films. How about a resource for the business side? Some advice you have or some software tool that people need to be aware of?
Big thing for me is LinkedIn. I suppose it depends, what you're doing, but if you want to create a mailing list, it's a great way to do it, is to use LinkedIn. You can just put in a name of a famous engineer, and you can ask to be his friend or whatever. Mm-hmm. And once he says yes, you have his email address.
Very cool. So then that'll help you build an email address or an email list.
Yeah.
Good tip. I like that. I don't use LinkedIn myself. Never really kind of adopted it, but I keep threatening to do it. So I'll go take another look. All right. This is a hypothetical question, but you rewind and you're back to when you were first starting out, but it's today and you had to start over again. You needed a simple setup for recording. You needed to find people to make music with and record. And you also needed to make ends meet. You described what it was like in the past. Maybe it's the same thing today.
Boy, I don't know. I guess I would, you get a vocal chain. I don't, depends what you're doing,
Yeah. Well, if I would be so bold as to try and answer the question for you, I would say even today, you could still take out an $8,000 loan if you wanted to. And that would outfit you with an entire laptop interface. You got a great microphone. So you could start recording a simple setup with that. As far as ends meet, you already told us you work in a restaurant, you do what you got to do and start out there. And then as far as meeting people, I guess, you talked about using something powerful like LinkedIn to try and find people to work with.
Yeah, I guess what I would do is, I'd go around to all the clubs and just meet as many people as I can also, just be part of the scene. The thing is, back when I started, there were very few recording studios. You had a home recording studio, it was like, oh, wow. And now everybody and their sister has one. So it's a little different. But your success is going to be based on you, not your gear. The people are going to come to your studio, no matter how basic it is, they're going to come there because of you, And that's the new paradigm. If you're a musician and you can play instruments and produce and engineer, that's kind of like, instead of just being a musician, now you've got all those hats, and producer and stuff. Those are the guys who do well, and you know that.
Okay, cool, man. Well, thank you for answering that. Now, here's the last doozy. What's the single most important thing our listeners can do to be a rock star of the studio themselves?
Well, I would choose records that you admire and try to emulate them. Above all, just do it. Just record anything. Just do whatever you can. It's really important to play records, things that you admire, like, well, that's the way I want my bass to sound, or kick to sound, or not that everything you do is going to sound the same, but you got to have your heroes.
I remembered a comment I was going to make on what you said on the last question, which is you talked about when you got started, there weren't so many studios and now everybody's got a laptop or something. And I would say the takeaway from that is whatever you're starting out with now, see if you can figure out what that niche is, that there's not so much of everybody just yet, where you can offer something unique like you did back when creating an overdub studio was a unique thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure what that would be, but that would be the thing.
Yeah. Well, and then like you said, just do it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, Carl, thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. My head is spinning with cool new concepts of, what it means to design a control room and get the monitoring just right. And I can't wait to hear your new speaker system.
Me too. Thanks so much, Lidge. I appreciate it and enjoyed it.
All right. Well, let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and follow you and reach out to you.
Okay. Its website is carltatzdesign.com. There's a link to the store there, but the store is shop.carltatzdesign.com.
And that's CARLTATZ design.
Correct.
All right, groovy. Well, Carl, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you around town, and I guess we got a coffee date to talk about Facebook in our future.
That'd be great. My pleasure, Lidge.
All right, man. Cheers. We'll see you around the studio.
All right.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.